Namaskar and welcome to the 60th episode of Diplomatic Dispatch. I am your host, Vikas Swarup. Last week, the Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Federal Republic of Germany, Ms. Annalena Baerbock, made an official visit to India at the invitation of India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar. So, in this edition of our program, we will focus on India's strategic partnership with Germany. The relationship between India and Germany goes back a long way. Post-World War II, India was among the first countries to establish diplomatic ties with Germany. Germany also became an important industrial and academic partner for India, providing support for the Rourkela steel plant, the Indian Institute of Technology in Chennai, and promoting cultural exchanges through the establishment of the Max Muller Bhavans. Today, the two countries enjoy a close relationship based on common values and principles of democracy and a shared interest in upholding the rules-based international order, multilateralism, and reform of multilateral institutions. In fact, both India and Germany are members of the G4, campaigning for Security Council expansion and reform. Since May 2000, India and Germany have a strategic partnership which was further strengthened with the launch of intergovernmental consultations in 2011 at the level of heads of government, which allows for a comprehensive review of bilateral cooperation. India is among a select group of countries with which Germany has such a dialogue mechanism. The 6th intergovernmental consultations were held in Berlin on May 2, 2022, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chancellor Olaf Scholz. The IGC was significant for its timing, coming as it did amidst the shock of the Ukraine crisis. It was also the first since the current government in Germany, led by Chancellor Olaf Scholz, came to power. It resulted in 14 agreements in fields ranging from agriculture to renewable energy. The biggest gain from the IGC was the launch of a new green and sustainable development partnership. Germany is already reaching out with new and additional funding of 10 billion euros to fund green projects in India under public, private, and PPP models. Germany has also been a strong ally to the Indian economy. Being India's largest trading partner in the European Union, it is a preferred source of machinery and electrical equipment, automotive and plastics, and is an important part of India's manufacturing ecosystem. Bilateral trade in 2021-22 was $24.85 billion, registering an increase of 14.2% over the previous financial year. Germany is also the 9th largest foreign investor in India. The total FDI from Germany from April 2000 to June 2022 is over $13 billion. There are more than 1,700 German companies in India and over 200 Indian companies operating in Germany. Germany has been an important development cooperation partner of India for several decades, providing cumulative funding of 21.8 billion euros for projects relating to sustainable economic and urban development, environment, and management of natural resources. It has also joined two of India's signature initiatives, the International Solar Alliance and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Science and technology is an important area of bilateral cooperation, and the jointly funded Indo-German Science and Technology Center has been functioning in Gurugram since 2008. The Indo-German education partnership is also flourishing, and the number of Indian students in Germany has gone up from about 4,000 in 2015 to over 34,000 now. There has been a long tradition of cultural exchanges between India and Germany. Max Muller was the first scholar of Indo-European languages to translate and publish the Upanishads and Rig Veda. And Rabindranath Tagore visited Germany thrice in 1921, 1926, and 1930. Tourism is yet another connector. The growing Indian diaspora in Germany now numbers more than 200,000. To analyze the many dimensions of this important partnership, I will now turn to two eminent experts. Ambassador Gurjit Singh has been India's envoy to Ethiopia and the African Union, Indonesia, ASEAN, and most recently Germany, where he served till his retirement in March 2017. Dr. Ummu Salma Bava is Professor and Jean Monnet Chair at the Center for European Studies in Jawaharlal Nehru University. She is an expert on European foreign and security policy and a recipient of the Federal Cross of Merit Germany's highest civil honor. Let me begin with you, Ambassador Singh. Why is Germany important for India?
Well, thank you, Vikas. I think you have given a very detailed exposition which shows why Germany is important. And I think today, when Germany is going through what it calls a tectonic shift, I think the one safe harbor it has is India. So in the current context, this steady partnership with India makes a mutually beneficial partnership the lodestone of our relationship. So I think that is where the importance lies. The second part of the importance, I think, is that despite the tectonic shift, I think still Germany harbors ambitions of strategic autonomy, which India has openly exercised. So I think there is an opportunity for more relationship of two countries which seriously want a multipolar order, do not want bipolarization, and want to exercise their strategic autonomy. Third, technology and economy remain the critical core of Germany's policies, in which India is a partner. You have mentioned that there are 1,700 German companies in India and 13 billion investment. There is also 9 billion euros of Indian investment in Germany from 200 companies. So company by company, on an average, Indian companies invest much more in Germany than German companies invest in India. So there is an inverse proportion over there, which makes India and Germany look at each other differently.
Dr. Bava, what does the launch of this new green and sustainable development partnership mean for the bilateral relationship?
So as Ambassador Gurjit just pointed out, it's a strategic partnership which is time tested. But India faces new challenges at this point along with Germany. And the most important is to see that how this green and sustainable partnership can transform India's growing economy. As India's economy, is now currently at the 6th in terms of the GDP terms and is continuous going to grow, the demand for energy will also increase tremendously. And I think one has to look at it in terms of India's commitments within the framework of the 2030 development agenda and the sustainable development goals, especially SDG 13, which is looking at green and just energy and a Paris Agreement. So I think within that framework, the fact that just prior to the visit of the German foreign minister, Germany announced 1 billion in terms of money and aid for green energy partnerships, I think emphasizes very clearly that Germany is invested in India's economic growth, and India is also looking to use this partnership to transition to a clean and green and a sustainable and resilient infrastructure development and growth, which will also help India to achieve its various targets, be it within the Sustainable Development Goals or the Paris Agreement. And also, I think it's also important to look at how, it takes the partnership forward to a new level. This is a strategic, pillar of our partnership. And I think in that extent, it's a very, very welcome development and a major takeaway from the IGC summit, the meeting which took place in May this year.
Ambassador Singh, now Indo-German relations were guided for the last 15 years on the German side by former Chancellor Angela Merkel. Now Germany has a new leader in Olaf Scholz. Do you expect continuity, or will we see some changes in bilateral ties with India under him?
Well, when the coalition was formed, they specifically mentioned India as a pole with which they need to develop a relationship. So I think that was new. It was basically continuity, but it was now stated. I knew Chancellor Scholz when he was the mayor of Hamburg, and he always had a great interest in India. So therefore, I think that part is definitely continuing, and the manner in which he received Prime Minister Modi, the fulsome nature of that discussions shows that this continuity is there. But it is the Greens, who are all young and youthful and have no experience of India, who could be more working on their values than on practical realities. And that remains a danger to dealing with India. Now, I very welcome that Foreign Minister Baerbock came to India. So she's one up on Max Muller. Max Muller never came to India. At least she has now come. So I think her arrival here And the fact that she met with women's groups, civil groups, saw energy partnership, I think would have given her an idea that the vibrancy of Indian democracy is not just in the constitution, but it lives. So I think that is extremely important. So yes, to answer your question, I think there is continuity with greater diversity, just as Professor Bava has said, on the environmental sustainability side.
Coming to the visit of the German foreign minister. Now, one of the most important outcomes of that visit was the signing of the comprehensive migration and mobility partnership. Which are the sectors that it is going to impact positively?
So first of all, the migration and mobility partnership, I think it's a very welcome development. 3 years into the COVID and with the war in Europe, German economy has also been majorly impacted. So at this point, you will find that 6 sectors in Germany are facing an acute crisis and shortage in terms of skilled labor. So one is, of course, the general technology sector, skilled labor, there is catering, there is logistics, education, and logistics also I've mentioned over here. So I think the big push and win-win factor on both sides would be that it will allow for migration and mobility in a framework which will benefit India as well. So it's a demand and supply situation which has now been given a political backing. And more importantly, what has also been recognized and a welcome development from an Indian perspective is that, it will allow students to stay longer for 18 months in Germany. Annually, 3,000 more work visas are going to be issued. The short-term visa facility is going to be improved better. And there's also going to be facilitation of, other visa-related issues and to travel. So I think Germany is also going to make changes in its Immigration and Work Act of 2020 in the next year, which will allow for workers from non-EU countries to get the benefit. So I think we see a very good synergy in terms of looking at an opportune moment in the bilateral relationship to scale up the migration and mobility, which really would be a game changer between India and Germany.
Ambassador Singh, you were instrumental in shepherding 100 top German companies to India when you were ambassador to Germany. How do you see the present levels of trade and investment between the two countries, and what can be done to boost them?
Well, one of the things is this agreement that we just discussed. This will be a big boost because without the adequate human resources and social mobility, you are not able to use the large number of Indian students in Germany now to improve the India-Germany trade and investment climate. So this agreement will certainly help. This agreement is actually an enabling clause because in 2023 there will be a new German law which the Chancellor in his new essay in Foreign Affairs talks about, that they are going to allow more people. So India has gone in early and signed this agreement. So when that new German law comes, we are ready to accommodate our people. So I think that is something which is quite forward-looking. The Mittelstand is the core of German industry. Half the world's technology champions are German Mittelstand.
These are medium-sized companies.
Medium-sized, family-owned, normally family-run, now less and less family-run. The Chinese have made a run to own some of them. We made a run to get them to invest in India because many of them were challenged by Industry 4.0. So you could actually shift to India with still a labor-intensive role rather than, and use that time to invest in 4.0 back home. I found that worked. And we brought many German niche companies to India. And I think that has been one of the success stories because I think they brought in close to 2 billion euros in new investment.
Turning to Germany's external relations, Dr. Bava, the Ukraine crisis has besieged Europe and Germany in particular, given its large dependency on Russian oil and gas. So how has Germany coped with the war in Ukraine, and how is it navigating its relationship with Russia?
So it's the most difficult period for German politics and in terms of its internal developments and external relations. At the first level, a few days into the war in Ukraine, Chancellor Scholz announced what he called about the famous Zeitenwende speech, that this is an epochal shift, and many may not recognize that outside of Europe. that Germany has had a very long political and economic relationship with Russia. In fact, in the early 70s, when the SPD was then in office at the height of detente, Germany had argued for a statement or a line which has now become very abused today in Germany, and that was called Wandel durch Handel. That means bringing about transformation through trade. And this was a core philosophy which has also contributed to the strength of the German economy. Today, both these things became suspect after the war broke out. So Germany, along with the European Union, is one of the key members, the largest economy. It has also come down heavily on its relationship with Russia in terms of oil and gas, going down almost towards a net zero in terms of import. Second, the last certification of Nord Stream 2, very essential for its energy security, that's been stopped. In effect, it means that whatever investment was done from 2005 has been nullified.
So Nord Stream 2 is the pipeline that brings gas from Russia
directly to Germany.
Directly to Germany.
This was in addition to Nord Stream 1, and then of course recently, some months back, we saw an explosion happen in the Nord Stream pipelines. And the third most important thing is diversification of its energy supplies to partners and areas traditionally not seen. So there's a new hydrogen partnership with Canada, both for production and transportation, and a gas deal which has taken place with the UAE now. So all of this clearly shows that, A, forsaking the old philosophy, second, rewriting the rules of engagement, but most importantly, what is there on the table in the coming months ahead will
especially during the winter.
Right, is the high energy cost, the impact on economic production, high inflation, and dealing with domestic compulsion. So Germany is offsetting that with subsidies, but the larger political issue is still on the table. How will you deal with Russia in the months ahead in terms of the larger political and economic engagement, and the fact that the security in Europe is getting transformed? And now you see Sweden and Finland, two standing neutral countries, deciding to join a NATO membership.
Correct. Ambassador Singh, we have a new orientation of German foreign policy towards the Indo-Pacific. With the release of the Indo-Pacific Guidelines in 2020, it's joining the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative and the deployment of the German naval frigate Bayern to the Indo-Pacific region, which also made a port of call in Mumbai in January 2022. So what necessitated this rather welcome shift?
Symbolism, I guess, largely, because before Ukraine, Germany was ready to open its arms a little bit more to the world, in which the Indo-Pacific played a role. But the Indo-Pacific at that stage was not a strategic doctrine, it's a trade doctrine to find new markets, whether it is Japan, Australia, ASEAN, India. So it was expand. It was not an anti-China position. It was not even a China plus one position. It was a China plus Indo-Pacific position. So unlike other countries who have got Indo-Pacific guidelines to maybe marshal China, not the Germans. The Germans are basically using it to expand their technology and economic outreach. But come the Ukraine crisis, and as Professor Bava explained, the reset with relationship with the Russians means that they are now looking at reorienting the entire economic security policy to Europe, in which two things happen. First, they stop talking of the common European security and foreign policy. In the article by Chancellor Scholz, not a mention of this. Second, a high emphasis on more defense. So Germany wants to become the net security provider for Europe. This is amazing. Some of that will rub off on the Indo-Pacific. But the Indo-Pacific is not part of this European tectonic shift that they are talking of. It is standing by itself. Now, in this, we can have larger defense increases, but for that, you first must have larger defense. There are no more ships to send you. So that is one. So unlike the UK or France, who have large flotillas in the Indian Ocean, the Germans are not there. So essentially, we look back at technology and economy. I would say that the Indo-Pacific means more German companies should look at India beyond China and set up manufacturing hubs here, which will then access ASEAN, Africa, and even go back to Europe under the India-EU BTIA when it's concluded, and therefore give an impetus to economic relationships. On the other hand, there is this slight movement of German companies towards investing more in the area. And I think that is something that we need to look at. And certainly India, ASEAN, Germany together should look. Germany is a development cooperation partner of ASEAN, India the dialogue partner. But there's something that we have never done together and we need to start looking at it. I think it is particularly welcome, and you mentioned the CDRI, ISA, and now IPOI. So Germany is very good at latching on to Indian initiatives, unlike many other countries. Now, what they will do with IPOI, which pillar, I think that is under discussion and we should pursue it.
Dr. Bava, your comments on this, is it largely symbolic or you expect something substantive to come out of Germany's new orientation towards the Indo-Pacific?
So Germany is not an Indo-Pacific power, and I think when it
that
put out
neither is France, but then
France still would be considered given its various naval interest in the region over here. But I think Germany is also looking at expanding its foreign policy footprint. As Ambassador Gurjit correctly pointed out, when you read the document, its primary focus is on trade and business, which is where its foreign policy interests lie. But there's also a recognition of the fact that, it needs to be an important player in regions not normally seen as a preferred destination. And I think that should be seen in the sense that following that you got the EU document on the Indo-Pacific come. So I think the EU also does not have its own capabilities. It is going to look at the member states actually putting together these combined capabilities, strategic from the French, maybe business and trade and commerce from the Germans, what have you, and the Dutch coming in. And so I think that is what we are looking at, and largely the interest would be to see a fair, open, rules-based Indo-Pacific over here. So I think in terms of the evolving power scenario in the Indo-Pacific, Germany is also part of the larger discourse to anchor the developments, and I think that would be a welcome development.
Ambassador Singh, now turning to China. Now, on the one hand, Foreign Minister Baerbock has called out China on the issue of human rights. Yet, in November this year, German Chancellor Scholz became the first G7 leader to visit China since the pandemic. How would you evaluate Germany's overall approach towards China?
China, at this time, when Germany's economy is in the doldrums, the post-pandemic, and then has this energy shock out of the failure of its Russia policy, is the anchor on which their economic recovery is based. So, whereas Germany has gone along with the United States to cut ties with Russia, I don't think they are ready to cut ties with China. So, I think this is one dichotomy that we need to understand. And Scholz in his essay is very clear about this, that there is no delinking from China. The German industry cannot afford it. Their profits come from China. Yes, China has been bad to them in not giving them a level playing field, for which Merkel had supported this comprehensive agreement.
Investment agreement.
So that has been stalled. The Chinese also need an insight into the G7 for which Germany provides. But now the point is that if China does not calm the waters in Asia, what will Germany do? How long can they close their eyes and then be faced with another Ukraine crisis, perhaps in Taiwan, and then the Americans will go after them to fall in line? So I think it is very important for Germany to be persuasive with China, to be responsive to other people. If they can do that, it is very good. But on the Indo-Pacific, come what may, I think ultimately they will keep watching Chinese reaction.
Dr. Bava, now India has just assumed presidency of the G20 and Germany has just concluded a very successful presidency of the G7. India is also the current chair of the United Nations Security Council. So from a geopolitical perspective, where can India and Germany work together to make a difference?
So I would connect this question that you asked to the strategic partnership. It's a long-standing 70 years engagement. There's a maturing in the relationship, and we're looking at two large economies, geopolitically and geoeconomically located in two hemispheres of the world. And I think that is where the focus comes. What can you do with your leadership? So a very successfully concluded G7, and India has been part of the last 3 G7 summits invited by the different G7 countries, clearly indicating India's growing stature, not just in terms of leadership, but the sheer economic numbers means that India is a country you cannot ignore on the international platform. India's G20 leadership comes at a very opportune time, when it was decided. At that time, nobody would have predicted that there would be a pandemic for 3 years, and second, that there would be a war in Europe, which will totally, bring about a disequilibrium in everything that we're talking about. So it's a leadership which brings a lot of focus, expectations, and then the question is, can we come through on delivery? And I think that is where very strong and robust partnerships, the one that India has with Germany, will become very critical. One could be to look at EU and India last year signed up on the connectivity partnership, and this could be one of the avenues by which Germany and India can partner on the G20 platform by taking connectivity to third countries. So both within the region and in Africa, I think there is tremendous work which can be done. Second issue on the G20, the fact that it is being linked up a lot to the SDGs, and to get the world back to the recovery mode, because we've fallen back on the SDGs as well. I think we can see a win-win in terms of technology, finance and infrastructure and knowledge bases coming together, again, both regionally and, across on that. In the region, I think an area of concern for India and definitely for Germany, it has invested a lot, is the country Afghanistan.
Yes.
Right? It is crucial to peace and stability and to the evolving architecture over here. And I think India and Germany can partner in what we would call as the most civic areas of engagement, where addressing issues on health, infrastructure, education will be some areas which will bring about dividends on the ground and will help us to take forward the political interaction, which is very important to keep it going over there. Terrorism will be another important area where best practices can be shared in terms of what can be done. But more importantly, the leadership of the G20 and the G7 is clearly indicative about the state of affairs of multilateralism today. And the fact that it has become ruptured, it is unable to bring the kind of delivery that one wants. And you're seeing a lot of different formats arising outside the formal multilateral institutions.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Bava and Ambassador Singh, for sharing your insights on Indo-German relations with our viewers. In a world that is increasingly beset with uncertainties, disruptions and rivalries, the growing strategic partnership between India and Germany is a force for stability in a multipolar world. The launch of the Green and Sustainable Development Partnership between India and Germany holds the potential to transform the bilateral relationship in all areas of joint endeavor, from trade to technology to tourism. That is all I have for you in this edition of Diplomatic Dispatch. I will be back next week with yet another dispatch from the front lines of international affairs. Till then, take care and goodbye.